In the heart of the storm, where thrones were raised and empires fell like leaves in the wind, an invisible force emerged, as potent as the steel of swords, the mandate of heaven. Have you ever wondered how a single idea could legitimize kings, topple dynasties, and shape the fate of millions? Today, we shall journey to ancient China, where the concept of the mandate of heaven was not merely a belief. It was the fine line between glory and ruin itself. We shall discover how this age-old doctrine not only redefined the future of emperors and peoples, but also sank deep roots into political and spiritual structures that still echo today. Get ready to uncover the secrets of a power that came from the heavens and could be snatched away in the blink of an eye. Amid the broad plains and mighty rivers of ancient China, at the end of the Shang dynasty and the beginning of the Zhou, something extraordinary was about to transform forever the relationship between earthly power and the divine. The mandate of heaven, or Tianming, emerged not as a mere political justification, but as a sacred bond between cosmic order and human government. The Shang dynasty, renowned for its obsession with oracles and ancestors, believed that the right to rule sprang from lineage, upheld by elaborate rituals and divination. Yet its moral and administrative decay created space for rebellion. When the Zhou rose to power, they could not claim mere military victory. Something greater was required, something that transcended the force of arms. The Zhou therefore proclaimed that the gods, incensed by Shang corruption, had withdrawn the mandate of heaven from them and bestowed it upon the new, more righteous and virtuous leaders. The concept of the mandate of heaven introduced a radical innovation. Legitimacy was no longer inherent in blood, but contingent on virtue. The emperor, known as the Son of Heaven, ruled under divine protection, yet that protection was by no means eternal. Natural disasters, famines, rebellions, and epidemics were regarded as unmistakable signs that the emperor had lost the favor of heaven. This morally justified his replacement, making the mandate a weapon of both stability and change. Unlike the European divine right of kings, which rendered the monarch unquestionable, the mandate of heaven maintained that the people possessed an implicit right to rebel whenever a ruler proved tyrannical or incompetent. In this way, the concept afforded religious legitimacy to revolution, planting a seed of political dynamism that allowed China to reinvent itself time and again over the millennia. Picture a gilded palace lit by the soft glow of lanterns, where Zhou courtiers whisper among themselves, watching for signs from the heavens. A shooting star, a relentless drought, while they ponder whether the emperor still holds the mandate. The atmosphere is one of reverent fear, for they know the wrath of the gods is no mere legend, but a living, inexorable force. Over time, the mandate of heaven took deep root in the Chinese imagination. Every new dynasty that arose, from the Han to the Tang, from the Song to the Ming, repeated the same narrative. The former sovereigns had succumbed to corruption. Heaven had therefore withdrawn its favor and legitimized the new rulers. It was a cyclical story in which rise and fall were understood less as human failings and more as the inevitable movements of celestial will. This perspective shaped not only politics, but Chinese culture itself, inspiring literary works, philosophies, such as Confucianism, and even administrative practices that demanded exemplary morality from leaders. It was as though the universe itself breathed through the realms of men, and each beat of that invisible lung could be felt in every drought, every bountiful harvest, every battle won or lost. The mandate of heaven not only legitimized power, it educated generations about the responsibilities of rulers and the implied rights of the ruled. It was at once a moral lesson, a philosophical principle, and a political instrument, a creation so powerful that it echoed far beyond China's borders, influencing thinkers and leaders in lands much further afield. By instituting a sacred cycle of rise and decline, the Mandate of Heaven not only underpinned imperial power, but also outlined a framework for Chinese historical narrative. Every new dynasty saw itself as heir to a divine mission, destined to restore order and justice, while the sunset of each regime was interpreted as spiritual and administrative degeneration inevitably punished by heaven. The Zhou dynasty, pioneer in the explicit use of the mandate, established a decentralized model of government in which feudal lords swore allegiance to the king, all under the celestial aegis. In time, however, power fragmentation and corruption eroded its foundations, culminating in the Spring and Autumn period and later in the Warring States era. Every warlord who rose up, covertly or openly, claimed the mandate for himself, illustrating how powerful a political tool the doctrine had become. Centuries later, the Qin dynasty, under the infamous Qin Shi Huang, would unify China for the first time. Although his brutal style of rule, characterized by book burnings and the massacre of scholars, did not explicitly invoke the traditional rhetoric of the mandate, the dynasty's swift downfall was attributed to his disregard for the moral and spiritual norms demanded by heaven. There was no escaping it. Even the most feared sovereign was subject to the judgment of celestial forces. The Han dynasty, which succeeded the Qin, embedded the idea of the mandate in its official rhetoric. During times of stability and prosperity, such as under Emperor Wu, it was believed that harmony between heaven and earth had been fully restored. The Han conducted grand rituals to please the gods and confirm their legitimacy, interpreting earthquakes, eclipses, and floods as divine warnings that had to be met with reforms or public acts of expiation. It was as though the emperor bore a spiritual thermometer, whose constant reading determined the health of the empire. Nor was it different in the periods that followed. During the centuries of instability, such as the era of the Three Kingdoms, the mandate splintered, passing from hand to hand like an invisible banner. Every leader who proclaimed himself emperor, whether Cao Cao, Liu Bei, or Sun Quan, claimed to restore order and right wrongs, seeking heaven's approval for himself, even though in practice, bloody battles and betrayals painted a far darker picture of the struggle for power. Centuries later, the Tang dynasty ushered in a golden age in which the link between a ruler's virtue and celestial blessing was celebrated in poetry, art, and philosophy. Yet even the Tang, in their final days, sank into corruption and revolt, such as the Anlushan Rebellion, events many regarded as proof that heaven had withdrawn its favor. The same pattern would repeat itself with the Song dynasty, challenged internally by political factions and externally by nomadic peoples. Later, with the arrival of the Mongols and the founding of the Yuan dynasty, the narrative of the mandate would shift once more, adapting to justify the rule of foreign conquerors as a divine choice necessary to restore lost order. This malleability, this ability to mold itself to the needs of the times, ensured the survival of the idea of the mandate of heaven across millennia. At every new turn of fate, in every empire that rose or crumbled, the same words were whispered: heaven speaks, and men must listen. It was an eternal cycle, unchanging as the stars in the vast night sky, yet as alive and unpredictable as the breath of the mountain winds. As China moved through the centuries, confronting invasions, revolutions, and profound change, the concept of the mandate of heaven endured like a silent shadow, shaping minds and power structures alike. Even after the collapse of the last empire, the Qing dynasty in 1912, and the founding of the Republic of China, the echo of the mandate still resonated in popular perceptions of political legitimacy and the right to lead. During the Qing dynasty, founded by foreign Manchu peoples, the mandate of heaven had to be reaffirmed with renewed fervor. Sacred rituals were performed to convince the populace that, despite being outsiders, the Qing had been chosen by heaven to restore order. And so they did, steering China through centuries of relative stability. Yet when the Qing faced internal uprisings, such as the Taiping Rebellion, and external pressure from colonial powers, many began to believe that heaven had once again withdrawn its favor. With the Xinhai Revolution and the end of empire, the rhetoric changed, yet the heritage of the mandate remained alive. Sun Yat-sen, father of the Republic of China, appealed to the people with talk of moral justice and the need for legitimate government, ideas drawn directly from the ancient belief that a ruler must govern for the common good on pain of losing his spiritual authority. It was no longer a matter of receiving the god's blessing in sumptuous ceremonies, but of winning popular trust, which ultimately was seen as a new manifestation of celestial will. In the 20th century, during the civil war between nationalists and communists, the same logic re-emerged, albeit in subtle fashion. Mao Zedong, leading the Chinese Communist Party to victory in 1949, presented himself as the restorer of order in the face of nationalist decay and corruption. Although religious language was suppressed by Marxist materialism, the symbolic pattern, the Mao, moral rise of a new leader against the degeneration of the old, remained true to the ancient mandate of heaven's cycle. Even in today's world, governed by secular principles, the cultural memory of the mandate persists. The Chinese Communist Party, officially atheist though it is, maintains a discourse that links political stability and economic growth to its right to continue ruling, while popular movements or internal crises are framed as threats to harmony, echoing the ancient celestial warnings. Beyond China, the idea of conditional and moral power crossed its borders. It influenced notions of political legitimacy in neighboring countries such as Korea and Vietnam, where the ideal ruler was expected to display virtue and competence, and where the loss of governing capacity could be seen as a betrayal of the Yao, sacred pact between leader and people. The mandate of heaven also provides a fascinating lens through which to interpret global political phenomena. Today, in many parts of the world, there remains a tacit expectation that leaders must be not only strong but also just, and that serious failures, corruption scandals, administrative incompetence, social disasters, legitimize their downfall. The idea that power must be constantly renewed and justified, that the ruler is merely a temporary guardian of public order, is an intellectual, spiritual, and political legacy of this ancient concept. In the final analysis, the mandate of heaven teaches that all human power is transitory and that true authority is not secured by force alone, but by the ability to maintain harmony between the needs of the people and the demands of a higher, invisible yet ever-watchful order. Heaven, it is said, may tarry, but it never forgets. And in the whisper of modern winds, the ancient warning can still be heard. To govern is a granted privilege, never an eternal possession. Throughout history, the mandate of heaven has proved one of the most powerful ideas ever conceived by humankind. More than a political or religious concept, it became a living, pulsing force that shaped entire civilizations and determined the fate of emperors, peoples, and nations. Across the great sweep of Chinese history, from the gilded palaces of the Zhou dynasty to the corridors of power in contemporary China, this ancient belief has been reinvented, adapted, and still today whispers its lessons through the centuries. The mandate of heaven reminds us that legitimacy is not absolute. It is earned and sustained through virtues that go far beyond mere military might or material wealth. The order of heaven, invisible and mysterious, represents the need for justice, compassion and competence in leadership. Whenever these principles are ignored, downfall becomes inevitable. A narrative that resonates not only in the past, but also in our globalized present. To reflect on the mandate of heaven is therefore to reflect on the very nature of power and responsibility. In times of political and social crisis, this ancient teaching warns us of the fleeting nature of governments that drift from their moral commitments. It is an invitation to vigilance, to collective awareness, and to humility before the greater forces that steer human history. And now that we have traveled together through the mists of time, where legend and truth intertwine, one question remains. In our day, who truly holds the mandate? Or rather, do we, in our era, still heed the signs of heaven? If you enjoyed this journey through time, share your thoughts in the comments. Which other ancient mystery would you like us to explore in our next video?